Hey everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. This is Wendy. If this is your first time here, welcome, and I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing 4 farmhouse home decor DIY projects. One of them I made for my mom for Mother's Day. One of them is for Pentecost, but all 4 of them can be used all year round. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and don't forget to comment on my other video that I'll link in the description box down below, as well as at the end of this video, so that you can be entered to win a new Cricut cutting machine. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For our first project, we'll be using a black 11 by 14 picture frame, 2 Eco Buddies poplar wood plates. You could use a real thin birch wood, and I had planned to use paper, but I had these left over, so I thought I would use them. And then some Waverly wax in antique, as well as some Waverly white chalk paint, and chalk paint also from Waverly in the color Elephant. We'll be using our Silhouette Cameo 3 and some white vinyl, and then the weeding tools and some Dollar Tree transfer tape, a piece of copy paper or cardstock, our hot glue gun, scissors, and a utility knife. And so the first thing I'm going to do is take my cardstock and draw out part of a dove, because I'm going to use this as a template to cut out of my poplar wood plates. And so I just drew half of him, and then I'm going to cut it out so that it's symmetrical. And on my first try, I made it a little bit too small, so I'll end up making a little bit bigger one. But then using my utility knife, I'm going to cut that out very carefully and slowly out of the poplar wood, and I'm going to make 5 of those. And as you probably know, Pentecost is coming up on May 31st, so that's why I'm making this project, in order to celebrate that special occasion. And so the dove represents the Holy Spirit. So I was really enjoying my time as I was cutting this out and listening to my worship music. And Pentecost is the time when the Holy Spirit comes down 50 days after Jesus rose from the dead. And so when I was done cutting them out of my plate, I looked into my camera, and this was what I saw on the screen. It's not what I saw when I was just looking at the plates, but the light coming down from my ring light went into those holes and somehow just made the most beautiful feathers in those shadows. And I just thought you guys would like to see that. I received a whole bunch of emails and comments letting me know that you guys had seen the little fish on the front of our planter that we did in the last video. And I call these sweet signs, which is just a sweet way of Jesus saying, I'm here. And we already know this, but this is just his way of confirming that. So now I'm going to get my frame ready, and I didn't have anything that I liked that I could put on the back of it as a backing, so I decided to just paint the glass and make that my background. So the first thing I did was took out the back cardboard and the paper that goes inside of the frame, and originally I wanted to give this a darker wood shade shiplap look, and so I painted the glass first with my Waverly wax in antique, and then I'm going to go back and give it some stripes to give it that plank look. But I ended up not liking it, and it didn't look as much like wood as I wanted it to. So then I went back in and thought if I gave it some white background, it would show up better. But that didn't work either. So what I ended up doing is taking my elephant and putting that on top of the white, and it made a really pretty, soft and subtle gray shiplap looking effect. And so I liked that best of all. So I really don't know if you would need to put the wax down first, and I had let that dry overnight. So that may be a step that you can skip altogether. And then once I got it to the right shade and look that I wanted, I placed another piece of glass from another one of these 11 by 14 frames on top of the paint, and then flipped it over so that that would be the front now. So now that my frame's ready, I'm going to use my Silhouette Cameo 3 to cut out my decal, and it's going to say, Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. And so anytime I use white, I know you guys can't see it very well, but you still see the same method that I use in weeding and pulling up the top part of the vinyl. And if you have any words or letters that get stuck, you just use your little hook tool that comes with your Cameo and kind of push it down, and if it gets out of place, you can see an outline on the backing paper to show where it was supposed to go. So you can just move it with the very edge of it because it's nice and soft and round, so it'll move the vinyl back into place without creasing it or messing it up. So then after I get that off, I'm going to use a needle to get out the little insides of the letters. And then after that, I'm going to use my Dollar Tree transfer tape, and which is really shelf paper that's clear. And then I'm going to put that over all of my words, and then I'm going to transfer it over onto my frame. Now, I didn't have quite enough room with the spacing that I wanted to have the last word on the same piece of vinyl. So I had to do a separate piece to have the word here, the last word of Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. And so I'll just do that in a second step. So there's always ways to do workarounds if you don't have a large enough piece, or if the spacing is too long, and instead of pulling out the 12 by 24 cutting mat, you can just place that second piece after you place the first part. And also, as you can see here after Spirit, I missed my comma. So if you just replace the backing paper with your letters on it and then grab the piece that you missed, you can keep going and your whole decal will be intact. So as you can see, I placed my decal with a left-hand alignment, and then I'm going to place my doves going upward on the right, and I want this to look like they're kind of flying. So I'm just going to carefully bend them, and this is where cardstock would work really well as well. And so I just used my fingers and made them crease in the middle, and then made their wings kind of up and then down and then up again, and so that it would look like they were flying. And then instead of just gluing them down in a straight line, I'm going to look like it's taking flight, so that it's technically just one Holy Spirit from 5 different doves. And here's how this turned out, and I am absolutely in love with it. I didn't even realize that it was going to match my lampshades so well, but I love the wood and the soft grays and white, and of course the message. And even though this is a project I'm doing specifically for Pentecost, this is something that I will have up all year, because of course all year we welcome the Holy Spirit. I've also had a lot of questions about the frame with the chicken wire, and I didn't do that in a DIY because I had this before I even started my channel. But all that is just regular chicken wire, and I used a staple gun on the back of my frame, and I love putting everything on display in the middle of this because it highlights all of the projects with such a beautiful surround, and it gives it the farmhouse look from the chicken wire. So I really love this, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next project, we'll be using 2 of these MDF love signs, 2 cutting boards, a press board Easter sign, and you can use any sign, but it's 13 1/4 by 9 1/2, and then 2 paint sticks. Here I have one from Lowe's and one from Home Depot because they're buddies, and then 3 mason jars, and you don't need the lids, some jute twine, and then some random florals. I have lamb's ear and then some Dollar Tree roses, and I forget what the name of those white ones are. And then a happy birthday pick, and this comes in a package, but I didn't have the package. And then one of our glitter little birdies that you've seen me use a whole bunch of times. And I'm going to be using the one that's already painted, and so you won't see me paint it, but this was from a prior DIY. And then some white spray paint, and this is Rust-Oleum, but just whatever you have on hand. And then some Waverly white chalk paint and some wax in antique, and I'll just be using that for touch-ups and for some distressing. And then my hot glue gun, some E6000, and my scissors. And then for the handle, I'm looking for a piece of tree branch that will fit into my cutting board hole. And so I just went outside and tried fitting it into the hole, and I hope my neighbors didn't see because I look pretty crazy out there with a cutting board in the bushes. So I did finally find a piece, and I cut it off with my shears. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite long enough, and so I went a different route, but this is something that you can do, and you don't have to spend any money on a dowel, especially since we can't go out and go shopping. So just use what you have, and I think the natural look is just so much more beautiful anyway, but you'll see what I came up with in the end. So to start this project, I just used a flathead screwdriver to remove the little hanging hooks on the back of these signs. And I kept these and put them in a little Ziploc baggie because those could come in handy for another project that needs to be hung. So just always keep that in mind, that the little mechanisms should have a box of their own because they always come in handy. So now I'm going to go outside to my painting station and paint everything down with my white spray paint. And this is MDF, so it really sucks the paint up, especially on the edges. But it was kind of okay because I'm going to end up going back in and distressing it with my sandpaper. So the dark wood that shows through matches the jute twine and the twigs that you'll see in a second. So Dollar Tree also carries white cutting boards, so if you can get them in the white, then that's the better choice. They only had the red, so I just went with it and changed it up with the spray paint. So after everything was all painted and dried, I went in with my sandpaper and started distressing the edges. And I really like this look because the MDF is brown, and so when I sand it, it gives it that brown color that will come through. Of course, the cutting boards are red, so we can't sand those, but that's where I'll use my Waverly wax in the antique color so that it kind of matches and all looks distressed. In the little nooks and crannies of the letters, you could use an emery board to get in there, but I just folded up my sandpaper and got in there that way. So now I'm going to put my box together, and I just used my E6000 and did a dotted line so that I could put my hot glue in between there and the two won't mix. And so there's a little lip on the cutting boards, and so I just went inside of those and then just placed it and pushed it real hard. And on the other side where the E is, because you want to be able to read it from both sides, only the top and bottom parts of that E will stick or comes out far enough to stick and touch the cutting board. So I just hot glued and E6000 those and then stuck that on as well. I'm using black E6000, which I bought accidentally, so you'll want to use the clear, and I've found my clear since then. But the clear, even if it does ooze out, you can wipe it off, and the black too, but I'm going to touch that up with some acrylic paint a little later. So now I'm going to place my two sidebars, and Michael J always tells me to measure twice and cut once. Well, I didn't quite do that, and so when I went and cut my pieces, I cut them a little too short, but you'll see that in a second. So I'm going to use my Easter sign to make the bottom, and so I used my miter saw. I love using big power tools, so I just cut down my paint sticks, and then I'm going to cut down my Easter sign to fit at the bottom. So since I messed up the only paint sticks I had to go ahead and cut strips from that same Easter sign. But if you do this project, it would be better to use the paint sticks and cut them the right size, because there's more thickness to them, and so when you hot glue them to the inside of your cutting boards, there's more to grab onto, and it'll be a lot sturdier than the real thin sign wood that I used. So originally I had planned to back these words with a piece of scrap burlap that I had, but I liked the openness of the box with it just the way it was, so I decided then to just paint the back of it. And since I had to cover up the black E6000 anyway, and I was going to have to kind of give it a different texture than just the spray paint on the outside parts of the cutting board, I wanted to make it look all cohesive and just one solid color of white. So since I needed to turn it upside down and put the adhesive on the letters, I put it on top of a box and then added my hot glue and put my bottom on. And if you're going to give this as a gift, which I am, I would want to paint the bottom, but I didn't, because I didn't have any more of my white chalk paint, or very little anyway. And so just note to self, don't do as I do as I say, and just paint the bottom so it's all pretty. So now here's where I'm putting my paint sticks in, and as you can see, they're just a tad short. So that was a bummer, but it's okay, we made do. And then speaking of cutting things too short, I did the same thing with this piece of branch, which would have been super, super cute, but it didn't work out, and so we have to move on. And so I ended up taking some twigs from this vine thingy, and it's kind of like a ribbon shape. So I'm planning to use that for November when it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I'll still use it, but it'll be a little thinner. So I took my twigs and then just started feeding them through the holes, and then just gathered a bunch of them. And then I actually get smart and start adding them from the middle and just kind of bending them so that they'll feed into those holes. So once I got the holes completely full, I took some jute twine and just made a sweet little bow at the end of each side, and then cut off the excess with my shears and made it to where it was just peeking out a little bit. So now I'm going to take some more jute twine and tie a knot to make my handle. And so I just wrapped it around until I got the size that I wanted, and just kind of made sure that it was a little bit flat and not overlapping. And then I'll tie it off at the end there again. Then I took my Waverly wax and distressed my cutting boards, and I just took the side of my paintbrush and then added some wax, and then I'd wipe it off a little bit so that I could get some darker areas and then some lighter areas, just to make it look distressed. And then I'm going to make a few lines on the cutting board itself so that it looks like wood as well. So now I'm going to take my jars and place them inside of my box and then add my lamb's ear, and then I put some of the white flowers in there as well, and you could call it done right there. But because this was for Mother's Day, and for some reason we always think of pink as being associated with Mother's Day and celebrating our mommies, I decided to pull the white ones out and just added some pink flowers instead. And then at the front where my sticks didn't quite reach all the way, because again I cut them a little too short, I decided to take one of those roses and glue that to the outside, and I just took it completely apart and then just glued the petals on layer by layer so that it sits a little bit flatter. And then to emphasize the openness of the bottom part of the box, I took a little piece of Dollar Tree greenery and pulled that through the E so that it kind of showed that it was open. Now I'm going to take my little birdie that's already painted white, and I'm just going to place him in his home right on top of the twigs. And then I took a piece of scrap paper and traced around my happy birthday sign, and then just cut that out so that there were some hydrangeas showing on the side. And then I'll take a gold paint pen, a Sharpie paint pen, and I got that at Walmart, and I'm going to write Mom on there and then place that in my box as well. And here's how it turned out, and I think it is so super sweet. It's a perfect Mother's Day gift, and even though it's kind of got a seasonal look because of the pink flowers, as you saw with just the greenery and maybe the white flowers, you can use this all year round. And so she's already seen it because she lives with us, but she loved it. And before she even saw the mom sign, she said she thought this would be a great Mother's Day gift. Then she saw the sign, but she got it early, but her birthday's also on May 11th, so we have to do something completely separate to celebrate Mother's Day and her birthday. She makes it very clear that we must have 2 separate cards and 2 separate gifts, not just one big one. But she did love this, and I hope you guys like it too. For our next project, we'll be using 3 of the galvanized buckets, a sign that I got from the Goodwill for $1.99, and I always try and pick up anything that's wood, and this turned out, once I sanded it, to be gorgeous. And then one of these over-the-door hook thingies, and then some greenery that I got from Walmart for $2.48 per bunch, and I think that's a really good deal because they're pretty bushy. And then some wire from the Dollar Tree, and it's got something on it that makes your hands dirty. Somebody told me, but I forgot what they said. Some Waverly White chalk paint, and then we'll be using the Silhouette Cameo 3. And I'm going to be using my 24-inch cutting mat, as well as some black vinyl, the transfer tape, and then my weeding tools, and then my handy dandy drill that Michael J got for me, my hot glue gun, scissors, and my wire cutters, and then also my rotary sander. So the first thing I did was sanded all of the paint and the words off of the wood and got it down to the bare wood that was underneath. And then if you have a Michael J, you can always use him to cut off the hard bits that are a little bit too much for my weak self. And so he just flattened out the part that goes over the door and then just cut those off. And then he's going to take the drill and drill in 2 small holes at the top and then measure to get the middle of the board and then attach that with some screws and just screw that in. So then I'm going to mark with a Sharpie where I want him to put some holes into my pots. And he said this is super easy and the metal is really thin, so you could really just do this with a hammer and a nail. And so he didn't like that it had some little prickly pokey parts, and he didn't want me to stab myself, and he doesn't want you to stab yourself either, so he grinded it down with a little Dremel. So now I'm going to paint my pots, and to do that I took off about 2 rounds of the jute twine, and the adhesive is not that great, so it came off real easily, and then that way I could paint and then wrap it back around and it won't have a seam. So I started painting this with some apple barrel acrylic paint, and it just didn't have the right look, and I am not good with the acrylic paint apparently, and so I really need my chalk paint back. And I actually had heard from my mom, who had been researching trying to get me some Waverly White chalk paint. Well, it's non-existent right now, but she said that there was another YouTuber that I know, Holly, over at Hot Humble Pie. She has a recipe to make chalk paint, so we're going to try that. So now I'm taking that acrylic paint and I'm going to put some water on it and then just kind of whitewash this wood because it was a little bit too yellow, but I loved the grain of it. And this white just made it so milky and pretty, and so I just put it on there very lightly and then just wiped it off with a paper towel and then did all of the edges, and it just looks so pretty. So because I didn't like the finish of the acrylic paint, I decided to have Michael J take these out and spray paint them. So after he was done and I had masked off the inside and all of the jute twine with some painter's tape and paper, and then I just replaced the jute twine with my hot glue gun and made it all pretty again. So now I'm going to take my icky wire, and I used some gloves so I didn't get it all over me, and check to see how long I needed it to be so that it could hang on the hooks of our sign. So it turned out to be 12 inches each. So I cut 3 pieces of the wire and then fed it through the holes, and at the end I just took my wire cutters and twisted little circles into the wire so that that would keep it from coming back out. So my sign measures 23.5 inches by 5.5 inches. So that's why I used my 24-inch cutting mat. And apparently I filmed my ceiling fan when I was cutting and weeding and doing all that. So you don't get to see that, but I'm sure you don't mind. And here's how it ended up looking. And I used the font called Another Typewriter and used the phrase from the musical Candide, which is one of my aunt and uncle's favorite, and it's "And Make Our Garden Grow." So I think it's turned out so pretty, and it was really pretty simple, and I hope you guys like it. For our last project, I had seen this on Pinterest, and it's a knife holder, and I thought that was such a cute idea, so we're going to put our own spin on it using 4 of these Dollar Tree hardback books, some different shades of off-white and white cardstock, some blue painter's tape, some more spray paint, and then again our cameo silhouette and the black vinyl, and then my glue gun, some jute twine, and my scissors. And so the first thing I did was masked off all of the pages of the books. And because, as you know, I'm out of my white chalk paint, I'm having to revert to spray painting everything. And you guys know I don't like the smell of spray paint, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So I just covered up everything I could to protect the pages because I need to paint the outside rims and anywhere where you see some color of the book covers. And so I'm going to have these be completely white. So I'm going to take them outside and spray paint those. And when you're spray painting anything, it's best to do short, small little spurts of paint and get a thin layer down first. And then when you go back for the second coat, it'll adhere a lot better. So because most hardback books are engraved with the title on the spine, I don't want to see that. So even though it's painted, you can still see the indentation of the titles. So to cover that up, I'm going to use my cardstock, and I'm just going to kind of contour it around and cut it to the size that I need. And then that's going to get rid of the letters and the title. So I just used my hot glue gun to place that around the spine and onto the book on both sides. And anytime you run out of glue in your glue gun, I got this tip from a viewer, and it was like one of the best ones I ever received. But if you just put a dot of hot glue on your stick and then put it into your glue gun, it will stay and the stick doesn't fall out. So I've shared that a couple of times, but just in case you missed it, there you go. So now I'm going to remove all of the painter's tape and reveal my pretty pages. And then I'm going to cut out my decals from my Silhouette Cameo 3. And I'll have all of these decals that I've shown you in this video on my Etsy shop, and that's White Sparrow Living. And if you don't have a cutting machine and you don't want to purchase the decals, I'm going to give you another option in my next video. And I was supposed to do that on this video, but I completely forgot. And you guys know I only retain water these days. So I will get that out on my next video. So I just cut out my words on my silhouette, and I used the words cut, chop, slice, and dice because those are all apparently things you do when you're using knives, and I thought that would be cute to put on the books. And so I'm using the font called the Skinny, and I'll have all of the fonts that I used in the description box below, but I downloaded this one from dafont.com, and you can do that for free if you just use it for personal use. So I just went through the same motions and weeded everything out, put my transfer tape on there, and then put it onto the side of my books going sideways. And then I just pull it up after I squeegee it on there, and there's your word. So now I'm going to put my books together by placing some hot glue in between them, and I want them to sit on the counter, obviously, so I want them to be even. And then I also want the fronts of the books to be flush so that you have different depths of the different books, and I think that just gives it some more character and makes it cuter. So now I'm going to take my jute twine and wrap that around a few times and then tie a sweet little bow in the front. And I used my sister-in-law to help me hold that while I made the bow. And here's how it turns out. And I was really glad I had white knives that we just got not too long ago. And then I put in a couple of these really weathered old knives with the wood handles. And I just think this turned out so sweet, and it's just crisp and clean. And I've never really liked the looks of a knife block on the countertop. So I think in this case, it's not only acceptable, I think it's a must-have. And you know, since we can't go shopping for Mother's Day, maybe you have 4 books at home that you could use and make this special gift for your mom. And I think she would love this. I know I would. I know I do. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think, and don't forget to put your prayer request in our community tab. Then once you've prayed for somebody, don't forget to give it a thumbs up so that they know they have all these prayers ascending for them. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!